They say history remembers kings, but in Africa's heart there was once a queen so fierce, so cunning and so unbreakable, that European colonizers feared her name more than the sharpest spear. She was Queen Njinga of Ndongo and Matamba, a woman who ruled not with submission but with defiance, who looked the Portuguese in the eye and told them they would never own her people, her throne, or her destiny. To speak of Njinga is to speak of resilience against impossible odds, of a leader who understood that survival in the age of conquest required both the mind of a diplomat and the heart of a warrior. And yet her story has been twisted, diluted, or hidden altogether in the shadows of colonial archives, because telling it truthfully would dismantle the myth of European superiority that colonizers fought so hard to preserve. But today, we strip away that silence. Today, we dive into the life of a woman who stood taller than empires, who wore her scars like crowns, and who showed Africa and the world that resistance could come draped in royal robes and armed with an iron will. Njinga was born in 1583 in the Kingdom of Ndongo, a land in present-day Angola, a region whose soil was rich with culture, traditions, and a fierce sense of independence. But even as she drew her first breath, her people's future was under threat. Portuguese colonizers, greedy for slaves and the wealth of African lands, had already entrenched themselves along the coast. They came with guns, ships, priests, and a doctrine that declared Africans less than human. They saw Angola as a warehouse of bodies to be shipped across the Atlantic, and Ndongo as just another obstacle to be broken. But what they did not know was that in the royal palace of Ndongo, a child had been born who would grow into the very embodiment of their greatest fear, a woman who would refuse to bow. From a young age, Njinga showed a mind sharper than any sword. Legends say that she could already walk and talk before she turned 1, that her intelligence outshone the boys in the royal court, and that her father, King Kiluwanji, recognized her unusual brilliance. She listened to councils of war, memorized strategies, and studied the shifting tides of diplomacy. While other princesses were expected to stay silent, Njinga learned to speak with the authority of one who was destined to lead. Some even whispered that the ancestors had chosen her as the true heir, though in Ndongo's traditions the throne usually passed to male rulers. This contradiction planted a seed in Njinga's spirit. She would not be bound by rules that diminished her worth. By the time Njinga was a young woman, the Portuguese had escalated their assaults on Ndongo. Slave raids intensified, villages burned, and alliances crumbled under the weight of muskets and cannons. Her brother, Ngolambande, had inherited the throne but struggled to protect his people. When negotiations were called with the Portuguese in 1622, it was Njinga, not her brother, who was sent to represent the kingdom. And it was here, in this fateful meeting, that the world first saw the audacity of a woman who would not be humiliated. Picture this. Njinga enters the hall where Portuguese governors and priests wait to dictate terms. They have placed a single chair in the room, reserved only for the governor. Delegates were expected to kneel on the ground, bowing to the supposed superiority of the Portuguese. But Njinga refused. When no seat was offered to her, she ordered one of her attendants to kneel on all fours. With regal poise, Njinga sat on the back of her servant, elevating herself to the governor's level. She looked him in the eye as an equal, refusing to allow Europe's arrogance to strip her of dignity. That act, small in the moment, became legend. It was a declaration that African royalty would not be demeaned, that her people's sovereignty was not negotiable. The meeting ended with a temporary peace treaty, a rare diplomatic victory that saw some prisoners returned, and Ndongo recognized as an ally rather than a vassal. But treaties with colonizers were written in water. As soon as the Portuguese saw an advantage, they broke the terms. Raids continued, allies betrayed one another, and Ndongo once again teetered on collapse. By 1626, her brother the king was dead, either by suicide or under circumstances so suspicious that whispers of Njinga's involvement have haunted her story for centuries. Was it ambition that drove her, or necessity? Some argue that she seized the throne for herself, eliminating rivals to ensure Ndongo's survival. Others suggest she had no choice but to step into the vacuum, or risk watching her people fall to ruin. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. Njinga became the ruler of Ndongo, and later Matamba, not as a passive queen, but as a warrior sovereign determined to bend history to her will. From the moment she ascended, Njinga understood that ruling in the age of empire meant mastering both war and diplomacy. She forged alliances with neighboring kingdoms, welcomed runaway slaves and deserters into her ranks, and transformed Matamba into a stronghold of resistance. She was not content to simply defend. She went on the offensive. With armies trained in guerrilla tactics, Njinga struck at Portuguese outposts, ambushed their caravans, and turned the terrain itself into a weapon. For every cannon the Portuguese fired, Njinga unleashed cunning strategies that confounded them, and she did not shy away from the brutal necessities of survival. To maintain loyalty and discipline, she imposed strict codes. To secure her throne, she executed rivals and silenced dissent. To inspire fear, she embraced rituals that shocked even her allies. Stories circulated that Njinga kept a retinue of male concubines whom she dressed as women, reversing gender roles to assert dominance, and that she executed them mercilessly after use. Whether exaggerated or true, these stories painted her as both feared and revered, a ruler who would never be controlled by convention. But Nzinga's brilliance was not only in war. She played the Portuguese at their own game of politics and religion. She converted to Christianity, at least publicly, adopting the name Dona Ana de Souza after her baptism. Was this faith sincere? Some believe it was a tactical mask, a way to gain diplomatic recognition and stall enemies. Others argue that she fused her Christian identity with her African traditions, using both as tools of legitimacy. Whatever her motives, she used every weapon available, faith, language, alliances, and intimidation, to keep her kingdom alive. For decades, Njinga waged a relentless war against colonization. She ruled into her 60s and 70s, an age when most rulers had long retired or died. Yet she remained at the head of her armies, riding into battle, inspiring loyalty with her courage. The Portuguese, for all their might, never fully subdued her. She forced them to negotiate repeatedly, carving out space for Ndongo and Matamba in a world being consumed by empire. When she finally died in 1663 at the age of 80, she left behind not just a kingdom, but a legend. Her people mourned, but her enemies too breathed sighs of relief. They knew that in Njinga, they had faced a foe unlike any other, and yet her story is still controversial. Some call her a national hero, the mother of Angola, a symbol of anti-colonial resistance centuries before the term even existed. Others paint her as ruthless, willing to sacrifice anyone, including her own kin, for power. European historians often reduced her to caricatures, dismissing her as savage or unstable, because to tell the truth of her genius would mean admitting that Africa had leaders equal, if not superior, to Europe's kings and queens. And perhaps this is why Nzinga's story matters now more than ever. In an age where colonial narratives still dominate textbooks, remembering Njinga forces us to confront the lies of history, to recognize that Africa did not simply bow to conquest but fought, resisted, and survived. Her legacy lives on in Angola today, where statues of Njinga stand as emblems of strength. Her strategies of resistance inspire freedom movements across Africa and beyond. And her life, full of contradictions, warrior and diplomat, Christian and traditionalist, feared tyrant and beloved queen, reminds us that true leadership is rarely simple. So the question we must ask is this: why is Njinga not remembered globally alongside Joan of Arc, Elizabeth I, or Catherine the Great? Why are African queens still denied their rightful place in the pantheon of world history? Perhaps because telling her story threatens the very foundations of colonial pride. But we will tell it anyway, because Nzinga's roar echoes louder than silence. Her story is not just about the past. It is about every woman who refuses to bow, every people who refuse to be erased, and every nation that dares to resist oppression. Queen Njinga of Ndongo and Matamba is more than history. She is a mirror of resilience, a challenge to power, and a reminder that even in the darkest centuries of colonization, Africa had warriors who could not be conquered. And so, as her name lingers on our lips, let us not reduce her to myth or exaggeration. Let us remember her as she was, flawed, complex, brilliant, terrifying, and utterly unforgettable. For as long as her story is told, Njinga lives, and with her lives the spirit of resistance that no empire could extinguish.